Hello everyone, I'm Forrest McFreelava, and this is Speedplay France and Hearts of Iron 4, number 9. We left off with the war in Europe basically won. We put all of our troops over on the borders of Bosnia, Bulgaria and Greece, but we are going to move them away. For one, because the Netherlands is guaranteeing their independence, and two, because we have a lot of occupying to do. Now, we have just a ridiculous amount of problems dealing with all of this resistance. So we go ahead and turn our infantry groups into suppression corps by just adding some military police to them all. The idea behind that being that we have a ton, just an absolute ton, of support unit things created already, but not very much in the way of cavalry. Cavalry is better for suppression, so we are going to be building some of them. Otherwise, though, we're going to invade Sardinia, finally clean up that little bit of Italy still left in the European area, and hopefully just deal with all of this oppression, or suppression, and all of the people just trying to rise up against us. So we go ahead and go to gentlest occupation, just to get everyone to calm down for a bit, but not because we're trying to just not suppress them. We will suppress them. It's just a ruse, basically, to get them to stop caring that they're about to be oppressed. And luckily it's free to change your repression policies, so we can just immediately go back to repressing them as much as our military will allow us to. And that's going to be the plan. You'll notice only a bit of Czechoslovakia and Germany still care about being repressed. So we're just going to go ahead, use the cavalry we do have, put those on the various hotspots of people caring about being repressed, and hopefully just make them stop. That's at least the goal at any rate. So we are sending our forces over to do that. Also researching various tank things, military technologies. We are probably going to go ahead and invade the Soviet Union pretty soon. You'll notice there are the signs of battles going on between Czechoslovakia and the Soviet Union, which means that the Allies are at war with the Soviets. That's something I didn't really realize until later, though. We also go ahead and just turn all of our priorities to basically just repairing civilian factories so that we can quickly repair more civilian factories even quicker, and eventually then repair our military factories. Now that all of the occupations are more or less dealt with, we are just sending our remaining cavalry and units just around and about in order to keep people more or less as suppressed as they need to be, with the intent being that we will then just set the occupation policy so that we can get the most possible out of their lands without really anything else to worry about. Also, those pop-ups that I just closed out of immediately were Germany declaring war on Denmark, forcing it into the Allies, which is a little bit annoying. We also are just sending our remaining cavalry units to the various bits, still upset that we are occupying their countries. For whatever reason, this area next to Luxembourg, which I believe is centered around Bamberg or something like that, for whatever reason we can't actually deal with the occupation of it. It seems as though since we share control over the territory with the United Kingdom, for some reason the occupation intolerance is being dealt with in a mix between us and the UK and our forces, Bitburg. And our forces just don't seem to be doing anything about it, so we're packing it full of units in the hope that it'll help, but it doesn't seem to be. We also managed to land near Cagliari in Sardinia, and hopefully we're going to win that battle in time. Alright, so that all said and done, there's only one place actually actively resisting our occupation, and we are still flooding it with troops, hoping for the best. And it just doesn't seem to want to be working. You'll also notice we're making a ton of units, and it looks as though the British decided that they would also attempt to attack Sardinia, so they went and did that. How rude. Alright, so that all said and done, we go ahead and switch out our fascist demagogue for, I believe we end up going for a backroom backstabber or something like that for the slight increase to political power, or something completely different. I'm not actually sure what. I know that's not very helpful, but at this point, honestly, they're not very helpful either, since we don't really need all that much from our political establishment and all that. All we really need is to build enough motorized, or at this point mechanized actually, that we can actually get some mechanized corps ready to go. And besides that, just build up our army for our eventual fight against the Soviet Union. We're still trying to figure out what exactly is going on with that occupation, and really there's nothing going on with it. It just doesn't seem to want to work in a way that is just a little frustrating and not too sensible. Anyway, though, now I believe is right when I discovered that the Soviets are fighting basically the entire world, except Japan, weirdly enough. So really it's the Allies that are fighting the entire world. However, now it is just basically an ultimate priority that we fight the Soviets first and then focus on the Western Allies. And then eventually we will have to fight the Japanese. However, at this point, though, the reason we are going to focus on the Soviets is because while our military is, moderately weak, and we haven't actually built up enough of a force to attack, we have basically 9 units, which we have arrayed on the border. Everything else is just occupying territory. And basically, yeah, that's it. We have 9 units in our combat-ready army. Obviously, that's nowhere near enough to actually fight a war against anyone in the world. So once we manage to repair our industry and get our military back up to more or less fighting standards, then we're going to want to pick a fight that we can win. The Soviet Union is a fairly powerful state, more or less obviously. However, with all of these allied units already in our country ready to fight pretty much anyone, it makes sense that we will use them to help us topple the Soviets. And then I'm not entirely sure what happens to hostile armies that had been given access once we declare war. I'm not sure if they will end up sent over or not. I realize also that we need to actually build a new model of infantry, which we're going to go ahead and immediately I send with rocket artillery, although we haven't really researched too far into that. And immediately we go ahead and just build a just massive series of them. I think we did switch the rocket artillery out for regular artillery since we actually have a stockpile of regular artillery. But yeah, we are building a massive new army. The idea behind it just being, we can't really assume that the Allies will guard all of our flanks. However, we can assume that we will guard our flanks. So once we get a decent number of tanks and a decent number of mechanized up, we will hopefully have a new group of infantry and just be able to use our whole army in addition to the Allied armies, attack the Soviet Union. Once it's toppled, declare war on the Allies. If we're lucky, all of their units in our territory will end up just kind of stranded in islands of their control, and we'll just take all the ports and they'll die from lack of supplies. That's obviously the ideal world, and one that's so ideal that it's unrealistic and probably actively harmful for us to assume that that will happen. More likely than not, they'll probably all just be kicked back to their home countries when war is declared. Bulgaria and Greece are fighting, which is interesting. Bulgaria declared the war, so we'll see if they picked a decent fight or not. And now, you guys are very lucky that you get to see this at, I believe, 7 times speed, because now it is basically us just waiting for our army to be completed. We are already suppressing basically everyone there is to suppress. With the weird exclusion of that one area we can't actually get suppression forces on. The United States is part of the Allies, quite notably, which means that when we do fight the Allies, we're also going to be fighting them. And I don't actually believe that Japan is going to be defeated anytime soon, so we're also still fighting the Axis. We also do send some suppression units over to Africa, since there is a weirdly large number of resistance forces over there, and just resistance to occupations in general. And another reason that we are not rushing to fight the Allies is because we're getting quite a bit of rare resources from the Allies right now. And if we declare war on them, we'll lose all of that, and it'll really just hamstring our production. If we go invade the Soviet Union, we get all of their territory, all of their resources. It's a war that we'll be able to take to a peace deal pretty quickly, so we won't need to use occupying forces once that's finished and resolved. And from there, we might go ahead and just try to end the war with Japan, or we'll just turn immediately against... Alright, apparently the United States just declared war on Germany, so that's interesting. If they weren't in the Allies, they are now. But yeah, so the Soviet Union has a lot of just resources, and we won't have to trade for them once we conquer it, as simple as that is. Their war will end, so we won't have to deal with resistance, and then we'll be able to just turn all of our forces against the Allies. And in all of the extra time that we'll get when we invade the Soviet Union, we can shift the lion's share of our production over to things like aircraft, and probably just mainly aircraft, to be honest, but we can switch our research over to aircraft now. And then basically, hopefully, we'll have air superiority. If we have air superiority, we can do what we did in our Germany campaign, where we just clear the skies and then use naval bombers to clear the seas, and then use our submarines to just kind of float around under the seas, and yeah, just maintain control over as much as we can. So Greece won their war against Bulgaria, despite Bulgaria declaring the war, so tough luck, Bulgaria. That was a poor choice on your part. And it looks as though the Soviets are making minor gains against the Allies, however the Allies may be making minor gains back. So who's really to say? All I know is that that's a massive salient, and when we do declare war on the Soviets, we're going to immediately cut that off, hopefully destroying the lion's share of major Soviet forces. Probably not the lion's share, though. They do seem to have troops all across the border. However, it will just give a general boost to the Allies. Also, hopefully our forces will be more or less ready by then. We are also building radar stations, so we'll get a better view of what's going on everywhere. And yeah, as it is, we're very close to being more or less combat ready. All of our units will just be trained, or yes, I believe trained, not ready or anything like that, just the second level. So there will be no bonuses or debuffs to their fighting skills. We also have the Eastern Command as well as the Armies of Suppression. You'll notice that Eastern Command is relatively just puny compared to the Armies of Suppression. And in just about a moment, there we go. We have 35 new infantry groups. We go ahead and assign them a new commander, our most skilled commander yet, and we will send them all onto the border of the Soviet Union, although in 2 groups because apparently we have 2 borders. And now we will begin the 10-day process of fabricating a justification for war, and hopefully that'll give them enough time to get over there, at which point we will declare the war and hope for the best. So thank you very much for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe. When we come back, war against the Soviet Union.